is the warmest room and the smallest room, so I forgive people for falling asleep. It's very hot in here. Thanks for coming to my talk. It's ostensibly about LLMs. I'll just introduce myself a little bit. So I'm Greg. I work for a company called Code Enigma, LocalGov Drupal suppliers, obviously. Got my few links up there. QR code is for my LinkedIn profile. I'll publish a link to the slides on the LinkedIn profile, so if you want to connect on LinkedIn or whatever, then I'll put the slides up there. I don't know what the plans are for sharing slides afterwards, but yeah, it's going to be there. In terms of like my experience sort of so far with AI in general and LLMs and stuff, I have to say I wouldn't call myself an expert. I don't think anyone can yet because it's all so new. Not many people can. But I am somebody that's spent the last probably best part of a year kind of kicking the tires, trying things out, developing opinions, developing policy and procedure, because it's part of my job to make sure that we get that right. So this is going to be a talk that's partly about my opinions and my view on the AI world and the ethics and the consequences of all of that. But then going on to look at some tools that hopefully help give people some opportunities to potentially try different things and think a bit more about how they're engaging with LLMs at the moment, if they are. Just out of curiosity, by the way, is anyone actually using AI on a day-to-day basis, in or out of work? Yeah, quite a lot of people, almost everybody, it's not surprising. Is anyone actually using it at work, connected up to solutions? Yeah, okay, cool, quite a lot, okay. So yeah, this kind of talk evolved as I went along. At first I thought I was going to just kind of do some sort of demo of AI tools in Drupal, but as I got into it and started thinking and playing, I started looking at all the different possibilities out there for LLMs and realised that just how big the landscape is. And I'm coming at this as somebody who, being a Drupal developer and somebody in open source software, I'm kind of fundamentally opposed to the idea of closed solutions and vertical stacks of stuff. So I had a bit of a disquiet with the kind of big tech models and started exploring around that. And that was the direction this talk started to take. So I don't know if anyone was in Finton's talk this morning. He was talking very much about the service delivery of a particular angle of how you could use AI, which was that kind of AI search stuff. I'm taking a step sort of back from that really, and what this is more about is AI, LLM selection and management, and how you can go about that and the different possibilities and options. Does everybody know what an LLM is?
Large language models.
Large language models, and yeah, I mean, underneath that, essentially what we're talking about, right, is a huge piece of software, a neural network, which is very clever, very complex mathematics. It's beyond my ken. But yeah, essentially what we're talking about is a computer program. And obviously they've exploded onto the world, and they're really, really clever. But there are some caveats. I found this blog post that I stumbled across a couple of weeks ago. It kind of stopped me in my tracks a little bit. It was quite jarring. And I think one of the most jarring things about it is it's probably true. So it's talking about Gen AI there, which is generative AI, which is kind of these big general large language models. And this guy posted what you could call a disclaimer. And if you go through that list, it's quite scary because you start to go, oh, actually, that's not wrong. Like, we do a lot of hosting, particularly Drupal hosting, but we know, for example, that we're continually defending against AI bots. They're one of the biggest problems we have now in terms of resource consumption and DOS and stuff like that. So we know that content is being scraped with or without permission. We know that the International Labour Organization has done a significant piece of research into how much the people that are being paid to label the data that goes into the big tech LLMs are being paid, and it's not very much. Sometimes it's nothing at all, because they can spend a whole day labeling data and then be told the next day that they didn't do it right, so they're not going to get paid. there's the environmental consequences of the data centers, of course, and even if the data centers or the companies that are building the LLMs say that they're using green energy, they're still taking energy out of the grid. Governments are having to spin up other sources of energy, often fossil fuels, to pay for it. And there's the fact that there is an $8 trillion funding hole at the moment in the big tech AI models. Right? It's such a problem that even the Pope has weighed in. So, did everybody see that Pope Leo had written the paper about this? Right. So, I haven't read his document, to be honest, but I did watch an interesting dissection of it by the CEO of The Atlantic. I've got a link to that at the bibliography at the end of the slides, which is worth a look. But basically, what Pope Leo was saying was he used the analogy of the Tower of Babel to say that we need to be really careful about building vertically and putting too much power in the hands of a few people. And actually a far better way to do things is to build out horizontally and start with grassroots and build out our AI and our LLMs in that way. And that resonates with me, right? Because this Drupal, that's what it's all about. That's why we're here from a PHP point of view, is to actually all build a product together that serves all of us. So I think that's a preferable model. The other thing that was an awkward question from the previous slide, by the way, is what else could we have done in the world with $8 trillion? If you just think about how much money that is that we've spent on generative AI, it's pretty astounding. So where's the UK government kind of sitting on this at the moment? So Finton talked a little bit about this morning with the AI playbook stuff that he mentioned. There's a few of the documents out there. The government has put a lot of thought into this. There are quite a lot of papers out there, but they're very much focused on service design and service delivery, I find. There's not an awful lot that steps back from that and goes, okay, well, how should we actually go about selecting our models, and how should we actually go about examining the ethics that happen before we even get to the service design step, right? And I think there's a hole in policy there. There's a policy gap. And the other thing that the the UK government, a lot of governments seem to be quite focused on at the moment is getting their slice of the data center pie. So there's a lot going on with trying to get people to build their AIs in the UK, grow out the data center infrastructure and stuff like that, which is an interesting one in and of itself, because if you hold that up against the existing budget constraints, I thought this was really interesting. I'm not making any comment on whether I think this is accurate or not, but I thought it was a really interesting analogy for what could be happening now with the rush to build data centers. I'll just let people read that for a second. I'm all up for investing in better digital infrastructure in the UK. I think that's obviously only a sensible thing to do, but we need to balance that against what the need's really going to be. So, I'm going to stop being gloomy now and get to the positive side. So AI is here, right? And we're doing really, really great things with AI. We've got amazing stuff going on in medical research. LLMs are being used for all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's even AI in the lifts here, you know. So it's not going away. We need to learn to live with it. We need to learn to use it responsibly. The question that I'm hoping to start to get towards is, well, how can we kind of stay nimble, stay on our feet, make ethical choices when we're picking our large language models and things like that, before we even get to that service design stage. And for me, it starts with this, digital sovereignty, which I presume is a term that everybody's aware of, probably familiar with. People have been talking about it a lot. Does anyone have an opinion on what that means to them and what that means to their organisation? Nobody wants to stick their head over the parapet. Okay. Well, for me, it's risk assessment really. It's I read a quote actually, which was, it's the capacity to control your digital destiny, which sounds sensible to me. It's basically saying don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So think about where you're putting your data, thinking about where you're putting your critical services and all the rest of it. And I think all of that thinking is already going on in most of your organisations, at least on a sort of general IT service level. Is it happening in the space of LLMs and use of AI? Probably not at the moment. So I think that the EU are doing some really good work on digital sovereignty, and particularly digital sovereignty in AI. Again, Finton's talk this morning, he mentioned the EU AI Act. But the problem that we have is that the big tech AI is absolutely everywhere, right? It's integrated, it's easy. You've got Copilot just built into your Microsoft products. You've got Gemini built into your Google products. It's there. It's too easy to just use it. So I think what we should do is start looking at the risks of doing that. So you've got risks like, what if the cost model changes? Are we going to embed our business processes into a way of doing things that's then going to become too expensive to carry forward? Where's our data going? It's another obvious one. I think everybody's very aware of the fact that most of the big tech models, a lot of the data, if it's not going to the US directly, it's certainly directly available to the US. And we've got other issues potentially with closed source models. What if the company that's building your model suddenly explodes in a fire of debt and doesn't exist anymore? The model won't exist anymore either because it was closed source. It doesn't belong to anybody. Maybe another company will pick it up for pennies and start selling it to you for twice as much as you were paying. Who knows? So how do we break out of that stuff? And the good news is that we can take a step back from individual models and start looking at the standards that are starting to come up around that. So I've put a few up there, but these are, the idea is not to sort of dive into the standards at this point, but just to kind of give people an idea of what's out there in terms of options and possibilities. So LLMs are interchangeable and interoperable already. We've got things like MCP, which allows us to actually create little bits of software that make jobs easier for IAs to engage with and stuff like that. We've got OpenAI, who are obviously the company behind GPT, but they also created an API standard, which is kind of being rolled out. As I mentioned at the start of the talk, I'm not going to click on the link, but there's a very, very long list of LLMs, and that's not by any means exhaustive with one on Wikipedia. So there's actually a lot of choice out there and a lot of options. It doesn't have to be use Claude, use Copilot, use ChatGPT. So I wanted to quickly show you 3 tools that we're using at Codenigma. And the reason I wanted to show you them was because they actually allow you to break out a bit from potentially using a single model, but I would caveat that with, if you're in an organization where you have to use this software, you have to use that software, that doesn't stop you from using these tools because they're all compatible with all of the major AIs out there. So in terms of what they do, LightLLM is, I guess the best way I can describe it is it's a piece of middleware that sits between your organization and the LLMs that you're consuming. So what you can do is you can connect all of your LLMs up to LightLLM, and then you can integrate all your applications with LightLLM on the other side. And what that allows you to do is start to be able to swap in and out the AIs that you're using with LightLLM without ever having to touch your applications, which is quite nice, right? So somebody gets too expensive, you go, well, never mind, we've been testing this model and we're getting equivalent results, so we're just going to swap them out, right? And you can do, we'll have a look at it properly in a minute, but you can do all sorts of other things with it. Open Web UI is the one on the right. Weird logo, don't know why. They have a really nice ChatGPT-like open source interface, again, that you can plug any model into. You can plug your Copilot into it, you can plug your Claude into it, but you can also play around with the open source models and stuff. And it just provides a controlled sort of safe space interface, if you like, with LLMs and for people to actually use just for generative AI chat and stuff like that. And then finally, OpenCode is an AI coding agent, as it says underneath it. And again, it's as the name suggests, it's completely open. You can hook it up to the AIs and the LLMs that you've got running already, or you can start playing around with other things. So I'm going to try and do a demo. Let's see how this goes. I'm running on my mobile because the VPN is blocked by the free Wi-Fi here. So this is like LLM. Can everybody see that okay, or shall I make it a bit bigger? Is that right?
Bit bigger.
Bit bigger? Let me see if it looks, yeah, it's a bit bigger. So I can do loads of things with Light LLM. The first page, the default page, is just the various different keys, so we can see what different keys for different tasks going on there. The hard thing about this is getting my mouse to the right place. There we go. So if I click on models, hopefully that will not chug too hard. Mobile data. What I should have is a list of models that are connected to Light LLM appearing underneath. My phone is having a moment. Just try another page.
Can I ask you a question if you want to waste a few seconds?
Yeah.
Is it using open telemetry?
Sorry?
Does it use open telemetry?
I don't know enough about it to be able to answer that question. I'm sorry. I'll have to read the docs. Could you expand a little bit on what you mean?
So where we've got down the bottom where we're talking about logs,
Yeah.
really, that's kind of what we're talking about. There's a standard for sharing some level of visibility
Okay.
as much as we can, and it's been around for ages, and it's been backed by people like New Relic and Google and all of those guys, but it's become pretty much a de facto standard within the LLM world to
Okay.
use, for sharing monitoring data.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know without looking. I'd be surprised if it didn't.
Yeah, probably does.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there we go.
Wasted enough time to get it up.
So yeah, I just restarted my phone's hotspot and it's woken up, so that's good. So I've got a few models attached here, which I've set up. One of the cool things is I can put how much each model costs in on the side there, and then over here I can do things like I can set up universal guardrails. So that scroll up, so that I can download like preset sets of guardrails from Light LLM, or I can make my own. There's a whole load of stuff in there that I'm not going to go into today, but you can have a look around or catch me later. And then, as Finton was just pointing out at the bottom there's the usage stuff, which is quite cool, because I can see exactly how much money the organisation is spending on LLMs. I can do activity by key, so I can see who's using it. I can create teams and let different teams have different models available to them, different amounts of budget, so I can say, right, the development team can not spend more than $50 a day and they can use these two models. So I can set all of that up as I need. So that's very, very quick tour of that. Related, I mentioned Open Web UI. Well, Open Web UI is hooked up to Light LLM behind the scenes. So Light LLM is actually acting as a sort of middleware between the actual LLMs that I'm using and the chat interface. And this is just I've got a whole bunch of models I can choose from, but it's very much like ChatGPT. I've got my chat history on the side. I've got the models I can choose from. The difference is that, like here, I'll just use one of those silly examples. I can just switch model. So if I'm trying different things, I can just say, okay, let's see what this model says about. I can ask it the same question. I'll just go here, copy. But yeah, we just kind of use this as a way to test models, because it's quite a good way to just kind of like see how different models respond to different scenarios and stuff like that. But we also use it for internal kind of company AI chat. So one of the cool things you can do, I'll leave Quen 3.5 thinking there, is you've got workspaces. I think my connection's died again. That's really annoying. But you've got workspaces where you can actually build sets of documentation, for example. So I can upload a bunch of PDFs, or I can scrape a website or something like that, and then that will actually become what they call a RAG database, a vectorized database that's stored by OpenWebUI, and I can create like custom prompts and custom skills and stuff like that. So when I actually go to a chat, I can attach a collection. They call it a knowledge, but I can attach a collection of documents and tell it within those documents, please do this or something like that. So it's pretty much the same kind of stuff that you can do with like ChatGPT or whatever, but in an open source piece of software with interchangeable, swappable LLM backends. And then open code. I'm running it on a Linux terminal. You don't have to. There is a Windows binary. And it looks like some of the other agentic code agents that you can use, but it's completely flexible. And as I said earlier, nothing stops you from using this with all of the existing stuff you've got. If you're using Copilot or Claude or whatever, you can still use open code. Because if I just go connect, you can see how many possible providers there are out there for it. And that just so I can just tell it to. This is just a silly little example, but I've just for fun built my blog site with just vibe-coded blog site with Hugo. And one of the things that's quite nice about it is you can tell it again how much the model costs to use. So as you're coding away, it's actually telling you how much money you're spending as you work. So this was one that I haven't actually done it yet, but just as a test example, you can see at the moment I'm using Quen 3.5 coding model from a company called Scaleway, which is a French company that do a generative AI OpenAI endpoint that you can just connect to. But I'm doing that via LightLLM again, so I've got a key for open code. So back in LightLLM, I'll be able to see how much I'm spending in open code. But there, you can see it working away. So I'm not going to wait for it to finish, you get the idea. If I go back to my slides, that wasn't too much of a car crash. So, which models to choose? In terms of sort of licensing, there's four main categories that I'm aware of anyway. You've got your sort of closed source models, which is your Copilot, your Claude, your GPT 3 and above. I think GPT 1 and 2 were open or became open, I'm not sure. You've got weights available and open weights. So what does that mean? So this is about whether the training process and the training data is publicly available or not, right? So closed, obviously everything's private, everything's shut. Weights available means that you can download the models and you can use them, but they probably have some additional terms of usage issues, and you've got to be a bit careful with those, because sometimes they present themselves as open weight models, but they actually have the terms and conditions in their licenses, which means they're not really. And then you've got open weights models like the Quen ones and the Mistral ones, which are free to download and use at any size, but the training data and the training processes remain hidden, so you don't really know what the consequences, costs and ethics and so on were of the training process. And then you've got truly open source models where even the training data and the training processes are available. There's not so many of those, sadly. I'd like to see a lot more of them. I haven't tested it yet, but this Apertus one, which has been made in Switzerland, looks quite interesting. I think one of the interesting things, going back to the government policy piece earlier, is that in the data and ethics framework that the government's put out, their message to suppliers of LLMs and AIs and stuff is that they should open source their training processes and their training data. But we're all sitting here using models that categorically don't do that. So I don't know how that is being squared away in terms of government policy. I think it's largely being ignored at the moment, but it's an interesting policy gap I find at the moment. This whole thing of open source models versus open weights models versus closed models, and who's using what. So which models to use? There are loads, as I said earlier, absolutely loads, and different models have different jobs. So we've got embeddings modules which vectorize data. So for example, if you've got a Drupal website and you want to do AI search, like Finton was talking about this morning, then you'll use an embeddings model to turn your Drupal data into vectorized data, because it can't just search it like that. You've got chat models, vision models, code models, yada yada yada. Some models are polyvalent, so you will find some models will do chat, vision and code, some will do chat and vision, etc, etc. But often models are better at specific jobs. So if you start thinking about that and then pairing it with tools like LightLLM, as an organisation you can maybe start to cherry pick models that are good for particular jobs. So you can say, right, I'm going to use this model for that job because it's really, really good. So for example, I think Cumberland have a nice AI solution that for grading potholes, so members of the public can send them a picture of a pothole, right? So they'll have like a vision model which is particularly good at that kind of work, and they'll use it just for that. It doesn't mean that they're going to then use it for then their coding or whatever. So you can potentially start selecting different models for different purposes. And then in terms of how and where to host them, if you're going to go with experimenting with open source models and things, then one of the things that you can do is self-host. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it. I've tried it. I find that locally it's pretty slow. You'd have to have an absolute beast of a machine, like my colleague Sunil, to get away with that. But if you do go either locally or by, I know some people, I spoke to somebody this morning who's actually running their own GPU server at Scaleway. You can run a piece of software that will host and present your LLMs for you. So the two main ones are Olama, which is quite easy to use, but you're limited to a set of models that are on the Olama website. So if you go to olama.com/models, you'll get like a list of all the models available, and it's really easy. You can just sort of pull them down and stand them up and have a go. Or VLLM is a bit more complicated to work with, but gives you a lot wider spectrum of models to play with. But yeah, both of those are interesting options for kicking the tires and stuff, but probably either too slow or too expensive for most purposes. Or there are actually a whole load of commercially available generative AI endpoints. So that's that OpenAI API that I was talking about earlier on in the slides. So a lot of organisations now have jumped on that standard, de facto standard, and have started providing endpoint services that can be pay-as-you-go or subscription-based, that offer up a whole plethora of different models for you to try. So, some of my favourites. Probably overrated. Some of the ones that I'm trying at the moment would be a better title to that, probably, because I don't really have any favourites. At the moment, we've got a company in Italy called CWeb. I like them as a company because they are certified to the hilt, and they seem to take environmental considerations and ethics very, very seriously. And they've got like a spin-off brand called Regulo, where they're offering various models up that you can just use it as on a pay-as-you-go basis. Scaleway is one of our partners. They have, we use them a lot. I'm particularly finding that this Quen 3.5 model is working very nicely with OpenCode for at least for simple coding tasks. I haven't pushed it too far because I tend to live in the world of Ansible development and stuff like that at the moment, which is not terrifically complicated stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how people find it with more complex challenges. We work with Ionos, not really used their models very much, but they do have an interesting image generation model called Flux One that's available on a pay-as-you-go basis, so I'm intending to give that a go. And then probably most people have heard of Hugging Face if you're researching it all around AI, but they're an organisation that hosts literally hundreds of models, and you can again buy subscriptions or pay as you go for them. We haven't used them very much to date, but it's there. It's an option. So, has anyone got any questions about that before we have a quick look at components in Drupal? Yeah.
I guess so. Agile Coach has been trying to sort of assess and take an ethical view on some of these sorts of things, and trying to assess the impact on the environments and what the companies do, where what they're used for, and all of that sort of stuff. But we still, so okay, so we come up with Mistral. We've got some interesting things. We kind of the only one we found which ticks most of the boxes is Mistral. Yet we still then end up using Claude for code because it's the best in class at the moment. So there's still a sort of tension on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got any thoughts anyway. That's not really a question.
So as I say, I'm not really a Drupal developer anymore. I used to be, but I haven't touched it for quite a long time because I'm more on the infrastructure side. What I hear is that Claude is still the best. My personal view is that there is going to come a point where some of the open weights models and the open source models get good enough that companies like Anthropic are going to start to struggle to be able to price their product competitively enough to cover their R&D costs. Maybe. We'll see. I'm just another commentator, spectator, if you like. We'll see how that plays out. But that's one of my motivations also, to try and kind of like play around a little bit more with a wider set of models. I've actually got a friend who's he used to be a Java programmer, and he hasn't done any programming for ages, but he's now a CTO of a bike rental platform. And in the next couple of weeks, I've promised to go over to his house, and he's going to try using Qwen 3.5 and just tell me honestly how it compares to what he usually does with Claude. So that'll be really interesting, but I haven't done that yet, so call me in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Sorry, did you?
Yeah, I need to say really interesting. And have you, just one thing to mention, there's, if anyone's looking at trying doing stuff locally, one of the big differences I've noticed between Alarm and VLLM is VLLM you can run it concurrently.
Right.
You can send 10 requests if you get the right set up at it concurrently, whereas Alarm, if you send one request at a time, basically.
Yeah.
But you're right, we do need a dedicated hardware to do that. I'm really interested about the idea of the open source models. Have you done any, I'm working with things like Qwen 2.5, 32B. Have you seen any, what do you see as the difference between the open source ones and the closed source ones with regards to quality of output, reasoning, and ability to understand the question and give a succinct answer?
I'm really the wrong person to ask, because I haven't had chance to play too much with the closed source models myself. I mean, maybe if Sunil, you've maybe done a bit more around that. Maybe if you have a chat with Sunil afterwards, he'd be better able, because just to introduce Sunil. Sunil works for Code Enigma as well, and he's our man who's got his head deep in the AI gubbins. So he will have more opinions on that than I do. He probably won't agree with me on a lot of stuff either. But okay, well, I'll just move on a little bit, because we've got about 10 minutes left. I just wanted to talk about AI in Drupal and what you can quite easily do, because having sort of talked about all of that sort of background stuff, it'd be nice to see some practical, useful stuff that you could potentially do. So in terms of the components has anyone had a play with AI in Drupal yet, by the way? Yeah. I presume. Anyone else? Yeah. There's a few people. Cool. Okay. So it breaks down into two sets of components really. Providers, which are the connectors to models, and then if you're doing any stuff with RAG, as you would if you're doing AI search or something like that, then you've got database providers as well. And then modules can provide their own agents, assistants, and skills, and so on and so forth. But that tends to be the domain of each individual module and what functionality it needs to in order to do its job properly. In terms of providers, it won't surprise you, given what I've said up to now, that we're using the Light LLM provider. not because it offers any options more than any of the other providers, and there's a huge list of providers. But we're using that just because I just really like being able to control the models via like LLM, and so with that we can basically just provide all the models like that, and then just pick and choose which models to use for which tasks in Drupal. It's maintained by a company called Amazy. If you know Drupal, you'll know that they've been around forever. So it should be well maintained and looked after going forward as well, because they're selling their own IA services these days, so it's in their interest to look after it. On the vectorized database side, I mean, people who've played around with it more than I have might have opinions, but at the moment I'm just using the PostgreSQL vector database provider. It just works. It's quite easy to set up. So I've just basically been setting up a database instance of Postgres and just enabling the PG vector component, module, whatever you call it, and off you go. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can quite easily do out of the box. Yeah, it's all bread and butter stuff for most LLMs, apart from the last one, which has question marks against it for a reason. And Finton made a really good job this morning of showing just how complex and filled with dragons things like search and chat can be on a Drupal website. It's not easy to get that right. I haven't got it right yet, actually. I've been playing around with it, and variable results. Nothing that I would be confident enough to go to a customer with and say, hey, we can do this. I think you said this morning it's probably a couple of years off, really, to be safely used.
I think general use, like as a general market solution, yeah, you're about 18 months out.
Yeah.
I think you can do it now. It just takes diligence.
Yeah.
And I was asked the single most important thing is like you have to be on it.
Yeah.
You have to understand like every step, and it's not the technical is not hard, right?
Yeah.
And in regard to what you were saying about those, as long as your ADRs are good, you know, Claude is fantastic at writing the code. The difficulties in the governance piece.
Yeah.
And so you've got to put time into that. But
So yeah, that's the one thing on that list that probably is a bit like, beware. But there's a lot of stuff in Drupal now that's ready to use. So yeah, if my phone hasn't died on me again, let me see if I can't just quickly on, where's it gone? There, on my shonky LocalGov Drupal installation, which has not turned up. Don't press the wrong. Oh, that must be on the wrong screen. Oh, it is, it's on the wrong screen, that's right. There we go. So this is just you know, really silly stuff, but if I want to, for example, connection permitting, generate a piece of editorial for my news section, does anyone want to give me, there's no guardrails in this, so does anybody want me to give me a non-offensive topic to get the AI to talk about? Sheffield?
Here be dragons.
Here be dragons. Let's ask it about dragons. Can't actually see what I'm typing. There we go. So I can. So off it goes. So the LLM's actually busily drawing me up a piece of content about dragons. I'm not going to bother to read it. I'm just going to say, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you very much. I can then grab a piece of that text or all of that text. All of this, by the way, is in. There's a video that I put at the end of my slides, which, as I say, I'll share via LinkedIn. There's a 2-hour-long workshop from the last DrupalCon where all of these toys were played with in a live workshop setting. So if you just watch that video, if you want to have a play and you have LocalGov Drupal set up on your local computer, or you have a dev space that you can work with, then you can just try all this. So that's why I'm not going into too much detail about how this is all set up and stuff. But yeah, I can summarize that text. Yes, please summarize that. I'll just take that bit there. So And you can imagine this could be quite a significant time saver in some circumstances. Obviously, this is human in the loop stuff. I wouldn't normally just copy and paste that without checking that it's accurate, but it might save you some time. We've got silly things like, for example, you can get these suggestion boxes. You can put these boxes against different fields. So I can just say to it, give me a suggestion for some titles. Oof, what's my favourite? I'll go with the second one. So again, the LLM's receiving the content, and there's a prompt in the background that makes it generate a title for me. If I go and add an image, here's one I made earlier. No, I don't want one I made earlier. What am I talking about? I'll choose a file. I'll stick our logo in there. Oops. And so we've got a spinny disk because in the background, actually, the image has been sent off to a model that's actually capable of vision, so reading images. So in a few seconds, it should automatically populate the alt text for me, and I can have a look and decide if I like that description or not. So you can see the kind of things you can do. Generate potentially SEO tags and descriptions and stuff like that, and just potentially helpfully speeding up editorial process for new pieces of content. I have a feeling my connection's died again, so I'll just leave that churning. But so yeah,
most of the content designers in the room would be going, what possible use do we have of AI generated content, especially given Finton's talk this morning about making sure that the content is given properly before letting AI search it. I had a question about the title was written in title case. Is it possible to tell the AI to write it in sentence case, which should be more readability and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, basically behind the scenes, as I said, I didn't really go into that because there's a whole. Let me just put this back on full screen. There's a whole video which is really worth a watch, which I've got a link to at the end, where they show you in quite a lot of detail how you configure all this stuff. But basically, there's prompt boxes behind everything. So at the moment, I've just left everything default to do a quick demo. But you can actually get as detailed as you like in your own prompt boxes in your application. And I totally hear you about the generated content thing, by the way. It's just a capability demonstration, if you like. I'm not saying we should do that.
Can I
Yeah.
give you an example where it works brilliantly for both sides? If you take that page and you've developed that page, you've written that page yourself, and you now want to bring that also into conversational design, right? So you want to be able to expose this via an MCP or an agent or a chat interface. We now need to figure out all the utterances that anyone that doesn't know utterances, it's like sentences but keywords, right? Just think keywords. You can generate all the keywords and all the utterances that you now need to write content for to get that page properly into that conversational design. So you can actually use it as a tool to start you off in the journey of all the content you're going to need to rewrite to get your conversational design. And it works really, really well at that. It will not be perfect, but it'll. If especially if you're doing it for the first time, it's awesome.
Yeah, and you can see how things like, for example, being able to quickly summarise stuff, and if the good old days, we all named alt text boxes required, right? What happened? People that couldn't be bothered put a dot. So surely something that's been quickly generated by an image vision model is better than somebody just putting a dot. So it's like.
Yes, for the general public, again, I would hope that councils would be thinking about the image and realising why they wanted it there in the first place and what the story is behind that image and therefore.
It's an interesting one actually about content generation. The French government rolled out about a year and a half ago a big AI effort on their entire feedback system. So what they have in France is they have one government department which is charged with gathering all of the feedback from all citizens and responding to that feedback on a department by department basis. And they had like response delays of like more than 3 months. And they actually introduced a system to use AI to generate the replies, but they went further than that. They actually got the reply back and obviously got the human to verify the reply. If the human edited the reply, it calculated what percentage of that reply remained written by the AI or by the human. So if the human went, that's rubbish, deleted it all and rewrote it, it would say 0% AI generated, or anywhere between 0 and 100%. So when it goes back to the citizen gets their reply, but they also get a little note saying this reply was 40%, 42% generated by AI or whatever. And they're finding that actually the satisfaction with the responses has gone up, and mainly the lead time in getting back to people has plummeted from like 3 months to 3 weeks. So there's definitely content generation use cases that are already being done in Drupal that can be interesting. Making article content probably isn't one of them, but I will, as I say, I will share the slides. I've put as many links as possible to be useful in the end there. So if you grab, as I say, that's my LinkedIn profile. I haven't posted it yet. I will post it in the next few minutes if anybody wants to grab the slides. I've put a load of links at the end. Any other questions? Yes?
Is that AI generation is available already on the content, on the news article content on NGD?
No, you have to configure it. I mean, yes and no. All the kit is there, all the technology is there. You have to add it though. It's not part of LocalGov Drupal core, so you'd have to actually go and fetch the AI suite module and the associated bits and install it and configure it. But it is available, yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much. Oh, he did finally do the alt text.